Hello and welcome to the Let That Shift Go podcast. I'm Noel.
And I'm Lena.
And this is where we talk about the good, the bad, and all the shift in between.
We'll just talk mad shift.
Let's get into it. And on this week's episode, it's not me.
It's you.
It's you. Talking about blind spots.
Yep. I'm going to like this one.
Yeah, you like this one?
I do. I think because we all have them.
I've got a lot. But, they're hard they were even hard when we were talking about this. It was hard to even name them. I'm so blind to them.
Yeah.
It doesn't come right to the forefront, but once we started picking away, they start to show
there's a way to
themselves.
figure out what they are.
Yeah. But before we get into that, let's get into the skin deep cards.
All right.
And see if we can get a vulnerability going. You want to go first or me?
I'll go first.
Okay.
All right. How would you title this chapter of our lives?
How would I title this chapter of our lives?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, go.
I would title it The Shift.
Yeah. I mean, too obvious. But yeah, I think so. Yeah.
1, 2, 3, go. Okay.
Because I feel like this year we have or 2023 and 2024, we've just been moving past some of our fears that have been holding us back, where we've, a lot of times in the past, I've always tried to wait till I had perfection before I started to do anything. I was like, no, I got to get it all figured out. And the more and more this last year, just 1, 2, 3, go, trusting in myself and moving through it.
Yeah. What if it is all put together? Just do it.
Yeah.
Just pretend as if it is. Yeah, definitely. I like that.
Okay. So my question is, what's the most ridiculous thing you've seen me do and why?
The most ridiculous thing I've seen you do? Oh my gosh. My definition of ridiculous and yours are probably different.
That's okay. What's ridiculous to you?
I'd say the way you ride your dune buggy looks ridiculous to me. Going up a vertical cliff of sand to me is like, that's ridiculous. But
doing a wheelie.
It's probably because of my job as a flight nurse. I'm like, these are the people I pick up. And so to me, that seems super crazy. But the second, I know it doesn't ask me for the second, but I love this one, is you were, so in admiration of Lucas Mack, who's the Awaken, one of the Awaken founders for breathwork. And so at Fit for Service, I think I dared you.
Yeah.
We had a part where you had to come as your evolved self or a shadow self. And you dressed up exactly like Lucas Mack, which, he has the best outfits, honestly. And they just I don't give a crap what you think outfits sometimes. Yeah. And so you had this pink beanie, these pink slippers. We put all this crazy jewelry on you and a netted shirt with tattoos. And then we show up. Jewelry,
fake
everything.
Teeth. Yeah.
Fake teeth, like all the things.
Earrings, nose ring.
And we go to the event and you didn't know that he would be there.
Yeah, that was a little bit tricky because I didn't mind. I was like, I'm going to dress up, because this is, it was something that I wanted to do is become a breathwork facilitator. And I was like, I'm going to dress up as Lucas Mack. And then when they said, but he's here. And I went, this is not cool.
You were mortified.
Yeah, and then Mondo's like, you got to meet him. You got to see him. You got to see him. And I'm like, no, it's okay. I'm going to hide out.
And then brought him over.
Yeah, and then Mondo went up to him and was like, my brother-in-law, this and that. And I walked up to him and he was like, well, guess who he's dressed up as? And he looked me up and down and he was like, I don't know. And I was like, this is not going so well.
Hella said, it's you.
Yeah, Hella goes up and she goes, oh, you nailed it.
Yeah, so it was one of the most ridiculous, but it was also one of the most magical.
Yeah,
because then you became a facilitator with him.
Yeah, I mean, everything in that, what I noticed, or in that Fit for Service, in the beginning, we had a journal and we wrote a whole bunch of things that we wanted to accomplish. And I have accomplished everything in that.
Yes.
In that journal, on that list. And one of them was to become a breathwork facilitator.
Yeah.
And that was before I even knew it was even possible.
Yeah.
So,
and an Awaken breathwork facilitator.
Yeah, specifically
trained
with
by
Lucas
them.
Mack.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I made it. I did it.
You just had to see it. 1, 2, 3, go.
Well, it was ridiculous at the time.
Yeah.
But
I think it was awesome.
It worked out great.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So let's get into this topic about blind spots.
Okay. Yeah. I think just understanding them in the emotional patterns,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how they affect us. And
Yeah. And the first thing is
How they
like, how do they manifest as unconscious patterns of behaviors, thoughts, and emotions?
Mm-hmm.
And usually they're ones that we're unaware and unwilling to acknowledge.
yeah.
So what is an example of something like that?
For me, a long time was like, I really couldn't take criticism.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, most people are going to say that, right? But I would take it unusually hard
Yeah.
because I have such a need for perfectionism that anytime somebody would even say that I was doing anything wrong, I think I would just reverse the heat kind of a thing.
Yeah. Instead of even
Well, what are
saying-
you doing? Look at
Yeah.
you, and I
Yeah.
would just project something
It's
else.
not me, it's
distract,
you.
deflect. Yeah, it's not me.
Yeah. It's not me, it's you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say that's definitely one that is, I can recognize in you.
Yeah, and I mean it kept me. It has kept me stuck for a long time because, even through therapy, I think a lot of the focus of my therapy initially was pointing the finger at everybody else and looking at how everybody was so, I don't know, mean to me or did things to me growing up, that kind of a thing. And then how things were unfair now and what I'm trying to go through and woe is me. So I was really living in that victim mentality.
Yeah. Yeah. Even that you're in a victim mentality can be a blind spot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Big time. Another one is like someone who consistently sabotages their relationships, right? Because of fear or fear of intimacy, and they're unaware of it. They're
Yeah,
unaware
they don't
of
even
the
know they're
pattern.
sabotaging.
Nope.
It's a self-sabotage. And I've done that plenty of times.
Oh, you know where you can see a lot of it is on Love is Blind.
I haven't watched that yet.
Oh my gosh. It is like a study in human behavior. And if you want to watch people in their blind spots, has blind spots. That's what it should be called. Because we are watching people that are just unaware of their patterns and they can't figure out why their relationships are failing, and it's all too external stuff.
Yeah.
But honestly, it's just like, we continue to project, we'll rationalize, we'll be in denial, we'll avoid.
Avoidance, yeah.
Absolutely. And it just keeps us from really recognizing what the underlying issue is.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's probably obvious to other people, but you just watch people continuously go through these patterns a lot of times in sabotaging relationships. Why? Because actually you're afraid to be intimate or you're afraid to be in a close relationship.
It's kind of a protection mechanism.
Yeah,
kind of thing?
it's a protection mechanism and one that you're not even conscious that you're doing. If somebody gets close, you push them away and then wonder why they left.
Yeah.
And it's like, perhaps there's a reason why, not just that you're pushing them away, but why are you pushing them away? Are you actually afraid of intimacy? If you don't know that, you'll just continue to do it, wonder why your relationships constantly fail, So things like that. I think I love this episode because I know that we all have blind spots.
Yeah. Sometimes I think conversely to that, like sometimes I feel like I'm too needy or I'm smothering. You know what I mean? So some people will pull away with, like an avoidant type attachment style. And then somebody like me who's anxious, I'm always, it's almost like I'm smothering sometimes. And I'm not even aware of it. I just feel like I'm trying to fulfill a deep, void in myself. And I need closeness and connection. But that isn't necessarily the thing in the time.
Well, and you don't even know why you feel that way.
No.
That's why it's a blind spot, right? The other one is like, okay, well, let's say I must have blind spots. How do I recognize them? Because even when we were sitting here talking and I'm like, what are mine? And I thought, okay, go to the feeling. When do you feel the most triggered? When do you feel the most like angry or upset or annoyed?
What was that for you? What was the most?
I know that there's a few of them. And I think that one of my early ones that for a very long time, probably decades, I was unaware of is like people not showing up or not being on time and I'm waiting. And I would go into like this inner rage and like this like sadness. It would just make me so mad and so angry. And then, and usually it was at Mondo who he'd be late and he didn't know. And I remember one time he told me to meet him for lunch and I brought Jake. Jake was little. And I'm sitting in the restaurant and I'm probably sitting there for at least 30 minutes and he's not there, which is not really that bad, right? He was coming from work. But I could just feel this building of like this tension and like anger and just like I wasn't good enough to show up for.
Was it being on time kind of a thing?
It was making me like, it really wasn't being on time, because if had he called and said, hey, I'm going to be 10 minutes late, it wouldn't have happened. It was the sitting there waiting for somebody. Not knowing because, and it triggered this like sadness and rage. And I would just like blow up and I'd be like, I'm not even eating here. I'm leaving, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, what did I do? You know? And I was like, why am I'm so mad. But I realized that it triggered something in me from childhood, from waiting for a parent to pick me up.
Yeah. Got to go back to source. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, what is that feeling so similar to? It's that, you know? So that's where I had a blind spot. Like, yes, it's not okay for people to make you wait. Okay. Yeah. But it happens. And it's not personal. But it threw me into a rage that was not congruent with the situation happening. So
but it wasn't about that moment. It was
it wasn't about that moment.
Source, earlier. Yeah.
It was from an old hurt. But I was not really thinking about the old hurt. I was just thinking it was because of what's happening right now.
Yeah.
You know. So things like that, or somebody saying you're too much. Oh, that's it. Oh, I'm too much? Really? You know, it's like that
you ain't seen nothing yet, Jack. Let me show you too much.
Yeah. Yeah. How about you? What do you think? Recognizing and identifying them.
Yeah. I mean, it's so hard to identify them within yourself. I thought, you know, when we were asking each other, when you were pointing it out to me, it seemed much easier. I think for the things that I've currently been, you know, or in the past years been working through, even though I'm aware of them, there's still blind spots.
Yeah.
You know, specifically the criticism one. That's one I know about, and I really have this perfectionism in me, and I feel like I have to be perfect, and I'm trying so hard to be perfect. And anytime anybody says anything, I take it so hard and take it as a loss. And and I have a hard time stepping back and looking at it as an opportunity to grow, or, you know, in the moment.
Yeah.
Because it is such a blind spot for me. I just want to be perfect in that moment and try to please everybody, just a people pleaser, you know?
Yeah. I think, you know, one of these, when we're talking about trying to recognize them, recognizing and identifying them, is to notice the reoccurring stories and patterns. Like, you know, that this certain thing kind of turns over and over and again. Like, so it's just like the relationships that constantly end because of something. Or that, you know, for me, I'm constantly getting upset if people don't show up on time or they don't tell me they're going to be late. It's like, why is that such a thing for me? So in trying to do this introspection, it was like, okay, how do I figure out what they are? Is to try and notice the patterns.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, you know, if still nothing's coming up, you can ask people around you.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not blind to them.
Yeah.
You know, but it can be blind to you.
Journaling is also good, or going back through your journaling, because that's one thing where we have the ability to recognize patterns, you know, and see things.
Stories?
Wow, I've already written about this.
Yeah.
You know, this is another, here it is, you know? So, you know, a consistency with journaling, I think helps to maybe find that for ourselves individually.
Yeah. Or having like a mindfulness practice, you know, where you kind of slow down, you kind of step out of all the chaos and the noise and just come back to stillness. And what are the stories that are running through your head? You know, what are the stories you're telling yourself about who you are?
Some of those 80% of those negative thoughts, 95% of looping thoughts.
Yes, the loop. What is the looping thought? I feel like that's kind of a clue.
Yeah.
What's the looping thought that seems to reoccur? So I don't know. And part of that is just trying to uncover, you know, how do you uncover the root causes and the blind spots? So that, I'm telling you, a lot of times it's coming out of childhood. Here's a clue.
Look back.
Yep.
Take some time.
Yep.
Think about that first time you felt that. Like, because you touched on that earlier. Like, you had to go back to like, what am I feeling in my body?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I don't know if we talked about this before, but we have these 3 parts, you know, may have talked about in the last episode, but the 3 parts being, we develop our feeling self first, which is the 0 to 7 age, because we don't have intellect. So all we can do is feel. Everything in our environment is through feeling. Or if there's a smell, you can get a feeling. If there's like a certain behavior that's going on, you can get a feeling about it. If there's, you know, whatever, you don't have intellect, you just know how something made you feel. Then from, you know, coming up from that age into adult, you have your rational self. So you rationalize everything. Well, this must be this must be that. But it's not necessarily tied to consciously what you're feeling. It's just a rationalization of it. I mean, even as an adult, you can be like, why is this making me so mad? Like, yeah, he's late 20 minutes for breakfast, but I'm feeling all these things and it's not really rational because maybe he got stuck somewhere. Well, it's because it's not about rationalization. It's about the feeling.
We try to rationalize our blind spots or justify our blind spots.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's hard because it's not necessarily coming from a conscious place. It's many times coming from a feeling or how something made you feel. So, and then the third part is your higher self. This is the more neutral self. So you have your feeling self, your rational self, and your higher self. Well, the rational self is all caught up in the stories. Feeling self is all caught up in the feelings. And the higher self is just kind of neutral. Like, yeah.
Those are kind of stages that you kind of go through. You said 0 to 7 years old, you're in the feelings. And then 7
up, you're in rational.
Rational.
Yeah. And then higher self, yeah, if you are able to kind of become aware of what the stories are.
So they're also kind of stages, kind of like we're talking.
Yeah, absolutely. We're always trying to move through them. But just noticing when something's really coming from a feeling and is not rational. Like it's not, adult Lena who's having that like reaction. It's really feeling Lena.
Yeah.
It's feeling abandoned sitting there in the restaurant.
Yeah, being able to step back and observe that.
Yeah, definitely. But someone who, the other one that I like as an example is someone who grew up in a household where vulnerability was perceived as a weakness. So
I mean, that seems pretty common. I mean, that's just where we lived at. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you grew up and having feelings was weak, it's going to be really hard for you to show feelings as an adult.
Yeah, shut up, stop crying.
Expressing your emotions. And the other thing with this being a blind spot is it may make you really uncomfortable when people express their emotions. See, and you may not even understand, like, why is it making me so uncomfortable that they're crying or they're talking about how they're feeling? It's like, why are you doing that? Like, it just makes you really, it's a trigger, right? And rational you is like, well, I mean, it's not that big a deal, but feeling.
It's not about me. It's
not me. It's not me. It's you. Feeling you is like, that wasn't okay growing up. And, that might be something that you're not even really conscious of, but it's just like that program that's running in the background. So how do we work with these things? What are the things that we can do and recognize? And one of the things you talked about was attachment theory. And let's talk about that a little bit.
Attachment theory? Yeah. So there's a book written about it called Attached. And they talk about different attachment styles between couples.
Yeah.
And I happen to be an anxious, I have an anxious attachment style. And then there's also secure attachment style. And then there's avoidant attachment style. And there's variations of like mixes. Some of them are enmeshed where you have anxious, avoidant, that type of thing. But generally speaking, myself, I have an anxious attachment style, and my wife has an avoidant type attachment style. I was totally, oblivious, unaware to any of that. So, like we talked about with the need for connection, and I'm one of my love languages is physical touch. And so sometimes when I'm in a stressful situation or I'm being triggered, I feel the need to have, close or touch or hug or whatever. And my partner happens to have an avoidant type attachment style. And if the scenario is stressful or any kind of conflict, well, she doesn't happen to have the need to want to get close. She actually has the need to kind of pull away and step back and analyze. And that's just her mechanism for protection and safety. And mine is the exact opposite. And for many years, I had zero idea that was happening or even a thing for her. It just felt like for me that it was like an abandonment or kind of a stepping away. So it was hard to recognize that.
So that's all stepping into the blind spots, It's like, this is what's going on. But until you started working with that, I think that before that you could just go into a reaction about it as opposed to recognizing, this is
what's happening.
Yeah. And that's coming through, like psychoanalysis or cognitive behavioral therapy, or like just kind of educating yourself on the different types of attachment styles. That we're going to do a whole new episode on attachment styles, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think that's one of the things is uncovering the root causes, and where does that come from? And once you have, it is kind of adding into the rationalization, but bringing awareness to it probably makes it less triggering.
You got to be really, I feel it's very helpful to be very curious with yourself and be very vulnerable with yourself
Yeah.
while journaling, like expressive writing, just being brutally honest with yourself, because that's what it really took for me to kind of, you know, recognize and see that within myself. Because
Yeah.
we justify and we deny and all these things, but really getting vulnerable with myself and being just brutally honest about how I'm being, what I'm seeing,
Yeah.
really gave me some steps to kind of make changes in the places that I'm blind.
Yeah. I like that. So that is part of the strategies for addressing blind spots. Is one, the one thing we stress all the time is just becoming aware.
Mindful.
Mindfulness, cultivating a mindfulness practice is, and self-reflection. I mean, that's what can help uncover a lot of the unconscious patterns and increase awareness for blind spots. So what is mindfulness, right? I mean, in a sense, it's just slowing down and kind of detaching from everything that's going on and really being able to hear yourself and having different practices for being able to do that. So that is one thing that I would encourage our listeners is to find a mindfulness practice for sure. I actually have a book I'm going to make available, just a workbook for people to be able to kind of work through mindfulness.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. I think I'm going to make it available on the site. So if you're looking to find a way to practice mindfulness, there'll be something coming very soon.
Yeah, it's a very good baseline to kind of get yourself into this space and have some practical knowledge and some ways to kind of apply them and understand some of the vernacular that we use in this space.
Yeah, just start asking questions, one, recognizing the patterns, recognizing when you go into denial or like anger that's not congruent with what the situation actually is. Those are big indicators that you probably have a blind spot. Once you start to ask that question, it's like, well, what is that about? What is that feeling is that bringing up?
Well, some of these blind spots, I got to admit, like people have been telling me for years and I just didn't ever listen. You know what I mean? You hear it and you just go, whatever. You're just saying that. But if you look back, or if you just really rewind the clock a little bit and think about the names you've been called, or the things you've been accused of, or the way you are when people try to call out your character flaws, in so many ways, you can, you got to take, a grain of salt with there. You can't take everything in there. But in some ways, I see some patterns of like, people have been saying that about me for a long time.
There's your patterns.
Yeah.
But you got to take your emotion out of it. You got to detach from what you're making it mean about you and really take a look. I love stepping into that observer mode and just being like, how is that true? Or how do I observe myself in that situation, or what happened, and kind of step back out of the story so you're not the main character and just kind of see it from the outside perspective of what was going on and what was really happening, what was happening internally, what's happening externally. And is there something here that's just is not obvious?
Yeah.
But to you.
Yeah.
But maybe to others.
Yeah. For some reason, I always felt like anytime it's like I'm the bad person.
Well, there's
like
your
I took it
criticism.
so criticism. Yeah. I mean, I take it so personal. And we talk about, what other people do says nothing about you. It says everything about them.
Yeah.
But I've always taken things so personal that it made it, difficult to kind of separate myself from that.
Yeah, and it probably made it difficult for people to approach you with more honest feedback.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, that's not safe. I don't think I'm going to even tell him because he's not going to be received well. So
also because I would flip it back on them. You know what I mean? I was, so good at reversing the heat on some. If somebody called me out and somebody like, yeah, okay, well, what about
You just like flip it right back to them.
just 10 times harder.
Yeah,
like,
so
dude.
I'm not going to tell him nothing. Like, I hope he develops a mindfulness practice so he can figure that out.
Oh, I lost probably a lot of friendships that I don't even know why I lost them because of things that I've said and done. I just wasn't mindful about that,
Yeah. I don't think that's true anymore. I don't have any trouble telling you.
No, I'd hope that I've kind of risen past that feeling and the rational and floating in some of these stages that we're unconsciously conscious.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the books that I love about this, I think to help.
What was that?
Unconsciously
competent.
Unconsciously competent.
Yeah.
One of the books I love about this is a book called Myth of Normal.
Gabor Mate. Awesome.
I think reading that book actually helps you to question whether or not you might have some blind spots on things. Because it talks about the things that we think are completely normal, like we're raised culturally, it's kind of our programming, that may not be. Why do you think that that's normal? And start to question, like, why are you, how is that leading into anger? How is that leading into sabotage of relationships? How is that leading into all of that? And being able to really kind of have compassion for yourself.
Yeah.
That's kind of a big thing too, is really being able to observe yourself without being emotional about it in some ways, and really just kind of having like that observer effect.
Compassionate, but also accountable.
Yes.
Accountability, then compassion.
Yes.
Because I think you have to really take accountability for your part in any of that stuff.
Oh yeah. Just accepting your flaws, your imperfections as part of your human experience, rather than striving for that.
Perfectly imperfect.
Yeah. I have that. Yeah, that was like a very big motivator. And then just how do you, just integrating this newfound awareness into your daily life, and then that takes practice. It takes practicing new behaviors and responses that are based on some, increased self-awareness.
Yeah.
So once you start figuring these things out and really seeing them, and you're able to kind of forgive yourself, is to start doing things differently.
Yeah. So would you take like we wrote down 3 of the things that were maybe some of our potential blind spots. Would you say like maybe journaling on those things is just kind of seeing, or maybe I'm almost thinking like going back to when somebody told me about my blind spots and was really trying to point out like, hey, you really are, you over-explain because,
like just saying that you over-explain, that could be like, okay, could that possibly be true? If you really are able to step back and think about it from, an outside perspective, and be honest with yourself, really being honest. I did,
because what I've learned is that in some of the cases where I speak too much or I talk too much, it's because I'm not even really confident in my own viewpoint on it. So I almost am trying to convince myself.
Oh, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I just over-explain it. When saying less is so much more now. Because, it gives the other person their ability to interpret from their perspective.
Yeah.
It's like
not
reading
trying to control the conversation either.
Yeah, I don't know. Like reading a book, I feel like my mind is not limited to what I can imagine the possibilities. If this is a fantasy book, it's infinite because my mind has the ability to go there. But when I watch it in a movie, I'm limited to what the director's vision is for it. So really doing it for myself, I really just have to take it in fully for myself.
I think a lot of this too, if you're on this path and you're trying to figure out like, all right, what are my blind spots? What are the patterns? Where am I not seeing these things? How do I keep ending up in this situation? All right, so I'm doing the work, right? You become from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence. So what do you do with it? It's probably going to lead to some inner child healing. Yeah. And I feel like that's something a lot of people are talking about now, but it's a gateway to a lot of things, to really it's a gateway to the feeling self, and to be able to access, some of the old hurts or the old ways that we were taught it was okay to be in the world. And when you're able to kind of bring those things home, like really kind of integrate and do some healing work with your inner child, then it kind of changes the way you show up.
Yeah.
Right? Because those old patterns aren't running. Or you then have a choice to choose. How do I actually want to respond in a situation? Is this actually about me? Why am I making it personal? If I am, how do I not? And actually show up, Yeah,
I think you have to be in a really regulated state in order to hear some of these things. Because what I was thinking is like, man, I think how would I approach this? Maybe I would ask somebody that I was close to, that I had some sort of safety with, or somebody, a confidant that I could talk to and be like, hey, I wondered if you would consider sharing with me what you think some of my blind spots are. And really be ready to hear that. Because I don't know, I've done something similar, but I already had this self-convicted, like I was super anxious because I already felt bad about it and I was already judging myself. And so when I was talking about it, it didn't go really well, because then I automatically was like, but it's not me. But I tried it on another occasion where I was much more regulated, did some breath work first and kind of just settled in and was like, okay, I think I'm in a space where I'm ready to just hear and listen.
That's such a good point.
Yeah, because if you're going to ask somebody, you got to be in a space where you're
to receive it.
ready to receive.
Yeah.
And because I tried it when I wasn't, and it didn't go well, and the other person was not too happy about it. It was like a nightmare for them. Because it was like they called me out on something, called me forward.
Called you forward.
Yeah, but I took it as calling me out. And so I was just, defending. And it was like, oh, wait a minute. But I asked. This is something that I'm asking for. So
you asked with one eye closed.
And I wasn't really ready for it. So that's a way that it wasn't successful. But I wonder what you think about that, like different ways that others can maybe ask others, ask a friend or a family member or somebody confident.
Well, I think what you just said is really important is, you need, if you're going to be, kind of be with someone you trust and you want to ask about, what do you think my blind spots are? And really kind of do some self-discovery with someone who can mirror back to you. A regulated nervous system before you go into that is really important because you're still walking in with a blind spot, one eye closed. And the other, we were saying today, like a regulated nervous system is the new sexy, so figuring out ways to regulate your nervous system first before you kind of go into a conversation like that, or even before you're even going to do some self-reflection. Because if you're already revving and kind of beating up on yourself or you're already angry, it's not going to be the best place to be looking around, on your interior. So finding ways to regulate your nervous system is really important. And if there are people who are like, well, how the hell do I do that? Okay, so let's end with some ways to do that. Is 1, breath work, 2, breath work, and then, also breath work. No, but also mindfulness, practicing some mindfulness techniques, practicing meditation, and journaling. So what does that mean? It means that you're moving energy. You're moving a lot of that stagnant energy, like that hyped up, revved up energy. We need to like move that out, and if we can get to a place where we're doing that, then we're better able to hear, we're better able to self-reflect.
Yeah. And sometimes that it's helpful to walk while talking because it keeps your mind busy. It's moving. And so the emotions don't hit so hard. I find that's helpful for me.
Yeah.
Going out on a walk and having these conversations.
Yeah.
1, I'm out in nature. It's beautiful. And 2, I'm moving.
Yeah.
And I'm not sitting with those things. So something about that movement helps.
Yeah.
With putting myself into that place. If I'm not in a calm place.
Yeah, definitely.
I can do some walking or something. There's probably a ton of different ways, but those are probably some of the ones that I
think, even in having this conversation, I think that if you start with finding ways to regulate your nervous system first, and then really start doing some self-reflection, you'll be able to access so much more of yourself in that way. Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah. It wasn't me.
It's you.
It's you. All right, that's been another episode of Let That Shift Go podcast. I'm Noel.
And I'm Lena. Let us know what your questions are, and we'd love to use them on a future episode. Or check us out on Insta at Let That Shift Go, or visit our website, serenitycovetemecula.com.